Hey there, Internet. Welcome to another episode of the John Grave Show. And honestly, I'm about to name this week as, gaming. I'm trying to think of a title, but it's something along the lines of gaming tropes that need to die. And this week in that series, I'm pretty much going to be talking about. Let's see. Oh yeah, the word clone. Honestly, this word kind of crept up on me around the time when God of War came out. And it was something in which that, I know a lot of people, they played Heavenly Sword. I played Heavenly Sword, and guess what? Heavenly Sword was a pretty okay game. However, does a lot of people actually remember the number one thing in which that people said about Heavenly Sword? It's a God of War clone. All the way down to the woman in white with red hair fighting off these gigantic enemies and doing these types of execution kills. They even said the same thing about, Castlevania Lords of Shadow. They said the same thing about Dante's Inferno. And honestly, when it comes right down to it, I'm like, I see differences in these games. It's not like that in the core system, you can just press one button and then just beat the entire game. It's not like that. I mean, because there are still different things in play which do make the games different from one another. In terms of God of War, which I do have to explain for people, which is that, for God of War, it turned into a thing which was, it was a violent game. It did have 3D action. You could press square, and you did have these ranged weapons to pretty much destroy anything which was in your way, such as the chain blades. And pretty much it was a brutal game. Okay, fine. Heavenly Sword. It had something along that line. However, the differences with that game was the fact that it did have a heavy and a quick attack mode. And also, give or take with the... Also, it was the first games which did have QTEs. Or at least God of War, it did also have QTEs. However, they were ones in which that kind of revolved around taking out a enemy in a climactic way or trying to take out a Minotaur or something of that nature. Whereas in Heavenly Sword, it seemed to revolve more around the environments, and some of those did kind of deal with enemy kills. In terms of Castlevania Lord of Shadow, they had their system was more or less revolving around switching up the gameplay every now and again, of having to be platform, you being on horseback, you honestly fighting one of the more, I would say, or at least one of the better romanticized versions of one of the enemies from the first game. And honestly, it did kind of focused way more around its story than anything else, which really wasn't a bad thing. I mean, there is a difference there. The same thing can be said for Dante's Inferno, in which that even though that game, it did feel a lot like God of War, his weapon was different. They did kind of have the whole punish and forgiveness system, which kind of was a play on the morality system, and also. This was another game which did kind of focus on its story, but also kind of focus way more on the golem aspects. However, agree or disagree with that, yeah, man, these games are different. There is more to a game than just calling it a clone. In terms of, because if that's the case, every first-person shooter ever is just a clone of pretty much every other military shooter out there. Because if you really want to think about it, what is Last of Us? It's just a clone of Tomb Raider, which is a clone of Uncharted, which is also a clone of Tomb Raider Classic. So, honestly, with all of that, it's like, you really can't throw around the word clone a lot, because when you really think about it, it's like, yeah, all these games are practically the same fucking game, aren't they? I learned this when I was in school. Guess what? Everything has been done already. I guess possibly because that people, they just can't handle it. It's like, yeah, man, all these games, they pretty much have, man, the same tone. An angry person with a weapon goes around and kills people because somebody else they know they died. It's like, but honestly, there is a difference between God of War. I mean, between Saints Row and GTA. There is a difference there. There is a difference between God of War and pretty much every other game in which that I named. There is a difference between pretty much a lot of racing games, which that if I really think about it, is like really once you have Mario Kart, it's a bit difficult to try and look at other racing games and say, yeah, man, my racing game is different. You know, it's a bit difficult to say that. But then you have a game which is, what was it? But then again, you have certain games such as like the original Mario Brothers and let's say like the classic Gianna Sisters. Now that right there is a blatant ripoff of another game. Now I'm like, ripoff is a better term if it's just, yeah, man, you take the exact same system and it don't change anything. This is the same thing which can be said for games such as Doki Doki Panic and Mario and Super Mario 2. I mean, these are practically the same game with different characters in it. You know, just switch out the models and it's a different game. However, a clone of a game, now that is technically what a clone is in terms of it being like a ripoff or a clone or something. If you are one of those people out there who plays Last of Us and says, yes, man, this is a game which is different from Tomb Raider, or that it is different from Uncharted, then guess what? You love a clone, because they're basically the same game with honestly just a small different feel to them in terms of like what is Saints Row or like what is Grand Theft Auto. You are still, or at least like within like Saints Row 2 and 1 and looking at Grand Theft Auto 3 and I say Vice City, honestly, you're basically playing the exact same game with different controls, which is honestly kind of a given, you know. However, people really need to stop throwing that word clone around, because clone is something which does necessarily kind of come up just a little bit too much for my taste. It's not something in which that I look at it and it's like, oh yeah, man, it's a third person shooter and you're practically just like a soldier and you're out there shooting other soldiers, and I'm like, yeah, man, I can't stand this game because, you know, it's another military shooter. Honestly, I give games chances. There is a difference in which that it can turn out a bit different from how another game turns out. That honestly may be the reason why they didn't like Army of One, or better yet, or a Fuse. However, Fuse's problem, I would say, is that honestly the only real thing which did kind of keep that game interesting was the fact that you could switch out between the other characters, even though in the other game they did look a bit different. At the end of the day, what is the story? It's an average third person, pretty much a B-movie plot just thrusted upon these characters, which really isn't all that bad, but guess what? You know, you're not really expecting all that much. But honestly, for this though, it's like, look, I know that there are games out there which do share systems. Again, I'm a person who likes beat 'em up games, but honestly, when you come down and say, yeah, man, I pretty much discredit this game because, you know, it doesn't have, or pretty much it looks very, very, very similar to this game, then I'm like, why do you keep buying Call of Duty? Pretty much all I gotta really, that's kind of the question in which I gotta ask. Or why is it that, man, you constantly keep on going out buying, man, the same NBA game? How come, man, you keep going out buying every single Madden game, every single MLB game, every single game which does not change year to year? Why in the world do you go out and buy it then religiously then? I can see some type of appeal to it, but I still gotta ask that question. So honestly, until then, this may get a part 2, but honestly, for right now, I will leave you guys with that. So what do you think about it? Do you think that the word clone clone, it needs to die, and pretty much it isn't warranted all that much. And yes, before people throw up Dynasty Warriors, I do love Dynasty Warriors. However, guess what? The only real difference, which doesn't change in Dynasty Warriors, is its story. Guess what else changes in every other Dynasty Warriors? I believe the way how it plays. You know, because guess what? Dynasty Warriors 3, 4, and 5 are kind of similar. 6 is a very different game than the other ones. 7 and 8, they do kind of share, you know, some type of control scheme, but guess what? They're different. You know, especially since that 8 kind of runs off the rock, paper, scissors thing. So yeah, there is that. So pretty much, please tell me what do you guys think about this. Tell me down there in the comment section. I'll catch you on the next John Graves show. So please keep watching anime, keep playing video games. I am out.